Hello everyone and welcome to another What I Think review, and today we're going to be looking at this. This is the final and fourth pack in the Doctor Who Eaglemoss TimeLord Victorious figurine set. This is the 10th Doctor and Brian the Ood. Now again, as I did in the previous two, I am going to try and focus as much on the positives as I can on this, because obviously in the very first set review I did talk about a lot of the negatives and issues that I saw. So again, I don't want to repeat myself. If you want to know my thoughts on those sorts of things and the issues that the Eaglemoss range has, please go and watch the review of the first set of this range. Other than that, let's get on to looking at this set itself. So it's very nicely presented. I have to say, the presentation of the box, obviously the first thing, again, that it has an issue is the magazine in the background is sort of the folded cover. As I've said in the previous ones, it would have been nice if that had been a standard straight cover. But the actual figure display itself, I really like, and I like the fact that they're forward facing. You can see more of them. That was one of the things with the Daleks, is because they were side on, it just looked a bit odd. But the way that these are presented, sort of full face, you know, to the box, really sort of helps sell them a bit better. I think I do like that sort of you know, that presentation of them. Obviously the box itself is all relatively the same. If we turn it around, you can see on the back we've got information, you know, about the 10th Doctor, about Brian the Ood, and then just what's inside it. So let's have a look at what's inside the box. So here we have the two figures. We have on the left, as he goes round, the 10th Doctor, and then as he comes round this way we can see Brian the Ood. Now obviously one thing that I know a few people have said, and I've seen over the years from what other people have said, is that the paint application on the Eaglemoss figures can be quite hit and miss, and I have certainly experienced that with the Daleks. I have to say though, credit where it's due. Whilst there are a few sort of little paint splotches and things on these, you know, and there are little imperfections, I'm actually quite impressed with the paintwork on these. I have to, you know, I do have to give credit where it's due. I like to review things fairly, whether it's good or, you know, negative or positive or negative. And I really do like the you know, the paintwork that's been done on this. It's very good. It's better than probably something I could do at this scale. Put it that way. You know, I look at it and think, like, I've seen, you know, I've seen people sort of do like very small scale figure painting and things like that, and even just doing the odd 375 custom in my time. The smaller you get, the more the paintwork can be difficult to do. You know, so it is one that you know, I do think I have to give them full credit here, that they've put a lot of work into this. You know, a lot of the small details, such as the pinstriping, all of the Gallifreyan details on the Doctor's robes is very nice. You know, the Brian the Ood, it's a very, very simple one, but all the things, just even like the texturing on his head, is very well done. Obviously, there are a few small little things on this which I sort of look at and I think, you know, I'm not quite sure why they've done that. The one that jumps out at me most is the fact that his collar is this sort of dark burgundy purple rather than the sort of standard gold that it would normally be, or at least dirty gold. You know, that's a bit of an odd choice. I think I'm not sure quite why they've done that, and it's odd as well that, you know, his feet are incredibly narrow. You know, you look at the Brian the Ood feet and they're sort of quite big, sort of decent sized shoes, and then you look at the 10th Doctor's feet and they're much smaller than I thought they would be. You know, it is a bit of an odd sculpting choice, but you know, at that point I am just sort of going on to little, you know, very small details which aren't necessarily you know, don't detract from the figure itself. It's a very nice figure, they both are. You know, as I said, you know, I've had issues on the Daleks and things like that, and this one isn't without its issues. But I have to say, personally, obviously I appreciate that the paint application is different to each set, but of all the sets I've got, I think this one is probably the best so far. You know, I do sort of I do very much like the figures. It's not enough for me to want to make me collect more Eaglemoss things, but at the same time, it is one of those things that I think, you know, I am pleased if I did start collecting Eaglemoss, then I would certainly be drawn to individual figures rather than just getting every single one of them. You know, and this is certainly one that I'm very glad I picked up. But that is the figures. Let's get on to looking at the magazine. So here we have the magazine. Again, same thing with the cover, as I've said. Would have been nice if it was full rather than folded over, but there it is. But this magazine differs slightly from the other ones because this is actually a magazine of interviews. We have obviously with the producer James Goss, all of the different writers from the Time Lord Victorious saga. Having had a quick flick through and read through the interviews, they're all very informative and certainly very interesting. It's a very nice little collection of things, and then right to the end we have an interview with Neil Corrie of Eaglemoss himself, or Eaglemoss themselves. So it's a very nice magazine. I have to say, now I may have missed this when I was, I bought this without checking, and that's on me. And again, I want to make it clear there is no obligation by anybody to buy these sets. Nobody's making me buy these. And looking on the back of the box, it does sort of make it clear that there's not additional information in this magazine. It does say that it's, got behind the scenes info, interviews and artwork, and that is exactly what this has. But I bought this believing that there would be extra narrative pieces to the Time Lord Victorious in this set. Now again, maybe that has, maybe I've just assumed that of my own accord. That's probably the case. It could be that this has always been advertised as not including any extra narrative pieces, and I have just assumed that, and that is on me. But for those of us who collect these sets only for the narrative information, really, which is why I've always been collecting these sets. I haven't bought them for the figures, I've bought them for the narrative information, and the additional parts of the story. I assumed that there would be extra story parts in this, and there's not. And so now I'm looking at it, I have to question why I bought this then, because the one thing I bought this for, it does not have in it. And I'm not saying that I have been missold this or misled or conned or anything like this. I said it could be, and it more than likely is me assuming something I shouldn't have. But it would have been nice at some point. I don't recall seeing it. Again, it could have been listed somewhere and I've just missed it. If it had been made known that this wasn't going to include any new narrative information, because then I probably wouldn't have bought this. However, that being said, I probably still would have bought it, and I know that just sounds like I've just contradicted myself, but the reason being is I've just bought all of the other Time Lord Victorious sets, so of course I'm going to want to complete the set and get this one as well. And I look at it and think like, okay, well, it would have been a sort of, what do I do? Do I buy the set knowing that I'm not going to get the thing that I want out of it that I bought all the other things for, i.e. story, or do I not buy it and constantly have an incomplete collection? And again, I want to make it clear, I'm not having to go at Eaglemoss, I'm not having to go at the people that have put all the work and time into this, but it is one of those things that it is a question which I'm sure I'm not going to be the only person who's going to raise it and who's going to think about it. Those of us who just want to buy this for the story narrative, it is one of those things that it does feel like, well, I'm not getting anything out of this that I want, but I'm going to have to buy it because I'm going to have to get the collection. And again, we're not being made to buy it. We have the options not to buy it, but it does feel a bit... This is going to sound entitled, but I'm going to say it feels a bit unfair that, we're having to buy these things and not getting the things that we necessarily want out of them. That really does sound very entitled when I put it that way, but it's kind of difficult to describe what I mean. Because as I said, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, we are under no obligations to buy these. But the only thing that I would have preferred, really, with this magazine is have these interviews spread out over the course of the other magazines, and then just have had one extra little bit of Time Lord Victorious narrative in this magazine. It could have been anything. It could have been just some random story that fits in between the narrative of the novels or something like that. It could have been anything, but it would have just been nice if there was just one little extra piece of narrative in this, because I get the feeling that's what lots of people were expecting. As I said, and that is based on the assumption that many of us assumed that there was going to be in it, and maybe we shouldn't have assumed that, but it is what people were expecting. And so I get the feeling that some people may be disappointed by this set if that is the only reason they bought it, which is the reason I bought it. As I said, it is one of those things I do just want to make it clear. I know I've said this several times already. I want to make it clear. this does not mean to sound entitled. I'm not saying that, you know, well, we should get what we deserve. That's not what I'm saying at all. And I'm not disputing the fact that, you know, myself and I'm sure many others will have assumed that there is extra narrative in this when perhaps we shouldn't have. But it doesn't change the fact that we were expecting there to be an extra bit of narrative in this. And, you know, I think it's something that they could have. It would have been nice if it had been made clear that it was only the first 3 sets that would have included the narrative parts. You know, as I said, you know, maybe that's, you know, maybe I'm putting it being a bit too critical. You know, I'll hold my hands up and admit that could be the case, and this could just be me. As I said, you know, I certainly don't wish to sound entitled, but I can certainly understand that that's how it might come across. That is not my intention at all. But as someone who is only collecting these sets for the narrative information, I do feel like I have to point out there is no narrative information in this booklet. So let's give my final thoughts on this set, and then my final thoughts on this series of figure collections overall. This particular set, I'm in a bit of a quandary, because the figures themselves are the best I've seen so far. I'm really impressed with them. You know, they're not without their small faults, but they really are fantastic looking figures. And I really do love the detail work on them. They are very well designed, and it's really nice to have the, you know, the Time Lord Victorious 10th Doctor as an official piece of merchandise, even if it is just a, you know, a static figurine. It's a really nice piece to have. You know, and I really do like the detailing on them. You know, they've really sort of pulled out all the stops with these ones, you can see, which is great. However, the flip side of that is the only reason that I've been buying these sets is for the narrative information in the magazines, and I, again, make this clear, assumed that there would be extra narrative information in the magazine. And whilst the interviews in the magazine are very informative, very interesting, and certainly well worth the read, I don't dispute that in the slightest, I do feel like I do feel a little bit shortchanged. Again, not that I've been conned or making it sound like anything like that, because it is. I have done this based on my own assumption. I do feel a little bit shortchanged that there's not narrative information, extra pieces of narrative information in this booklet, because if there were, then I would actually be singing the praises of this set. I really would, you know. But as it stands, on the one hand, I'm very pleased with it. On the other hand, it isn't what I bought it for. So, you know, it is a bit of a difficult one to sort of give a final verdict. But overall, this series has been... what's a good way of putting it would be, overall, this Time Lord Victorious sets have been compelling, but underwhelming. I think that's the fairest way to put it. Compelling because the actual figures that we've got, you know, they're not without their faults, but they are very interesting looking figures. But again, like many people, I bought these for the narrative information, for the extra pieces of the Time Lord Victorious narrative, and those have been very good. As I've said, the one thing that I've always been saying about these sets is it would be nice if we could have just got the magazines as a separate purchase, because I think that would have been what most people bought these sets for. Underwhelming, I have to say, because the figures themselves are... they're not, you know, the problem with the figures themselves is their faults stand out more than their pros. And maybe that is just me. You know, I know a lot of people out there love the Eaglemoss figures, and I'm not saying that they are not, you know, decent figures in themselves. The sculpt of them are very good and things like that, but it's just, I'm not buying a sculpt, I'm buying an actual figure that's been painted, and it's often the paintwork that's let these things down. And, you know, and when you look at what's in the set and how much they charge for it, again, I appreciate, like many things, I'm sure the production costs are vastly higher than the selling costs and things like that. But at the same time, when you look at what you get in the sets, you do feel a little bit shortchanged in some way, you know, and it is one of those things that, as a consumer, as someone who has bought this, you know, like I said, I haven't been forced to buy these at any point, you know, I haven't been made to buy these, but I look at buying the sets just for the narrative information, and I just kind of feel like, you know, I can't help but feel like I've bought them, I have bought them, I've not been given them, I've not been told to buy them, I have bought them on my own accord, but I have bought them on the pretense of not buying them for what they are, which is a figure set. I have bought them for a narrative information magazine, and for that reason there's always going to be an element of this that is, I've bought something that I didn't necessarily want to buy, and so my judgment of them is always going to be slightly clouded. You know, and I want to, as I said, I want to review these fairly, both, you know, positively and negatively. So I think it's worth saying that these sets, in terms of the figures, are not for me. But if it's the sort of thing you're interested in building up a collection, then I certainly think it will be of interest to many people. And, you know, at the end of the day, I can't fault the work that's gone into these. You know, regardless of the paint application issues and things like that, a lot of work has got into these. The magazine narratives, you know, have been absolutely superbly written, and all the extra information that's in the magazines has been great. You know, as I said, in this one, it's a shame there wasn't more narrative information in this, but the interviews themselves are very, very interesting and well worth reading. It is one of those things, once you start to get into the Time Lord Victorious narrative, you do want to know more. Seeing it from a, you know, from the writer's perspective and producers and things like that, it is certainly very interesting to have a read of those, you know, and get a bit more sort of behind the scenes info into that. As I said, I think it would have been nice if they had separated out those interviews across the other magazines and just added a little bit more of the narrative into this, because that is what people were expecting. But again, people expected it. It was never confirmed or anything like that, so I don't know if, you know, you can really hold Eaglemoss or, you know, the BBC or anyone to account for that on the basis that if it's the fans have assumed something that not to be the case, then ultimately it is on us that we assume that, when perhaps we shouldn't have. You know, it doesn't stop the feelings of thinking, well, I feel like I wouldn't have bought this if that had been the case. But at the end of the day, whilst that might be true, I bought it. At the end of the day, I'm the one that made that decision, and I can't hold anyone else responsible for that. You know, I want to make that very, very clear, because I don't want it to seem like I don't want it to make it seem like I'm saying to the BBC or Eaglemoss, you've made me buy this under false pretenses. They haven't. I've bought this under my own assumptions, which I didn't think to check would be false. You know, so, you know, it is one of those things that is worth pointing out, as I said, because I want to review this from all possible angles. And the bottom line is, my angle on these Eaglemoss sets are that it's not really something I necessarily would have bought, but I bought it for my own reasons. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to buy it for my own reasons and then try and review it just positively. I want to review it fairly as a consumer of buying these products, and also as somebody who isn't necessarily someone who would buy these products otherwise. You know, it's just my honest opinion of them. But, you know, all that being said, having these as a set on a shelf all together, regardless of their contents, has been absolutely fantastic to see those on a shelf all together. It is certainly a nice piece to have on display, even if it's not something that I would normally buy. And it's one of those things, again, that, you know, as the part of the Time Lord Victorious narrative, they do have a certain sort of limited edition quality about them, which I like, you know, which sort of makes them feel like they're going to be sort of good collector's pieces in sort of, you know, 50, 60 years maybe. But that brings to a close another What I Think review. As always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, favourite, subscribe, share, it really helps me out a lot. And be sure to subscribe below for a link to my Patreon. I'm doing my very first figure animation, and you can get involved. There's exclusive content and rewards for those who do so, and friending my Patreon in any way gets your name at the end of my videos. I salute you all, and I will see you with another video very soon.